Yes, I'm Alex Rogers, a volunteer with the UK charity SARAID. And is that going to work? Okay, so I'll just tell you a little bit about the charity, a bit of background on how the charity was formed and what we do, and then I'll sort of talk roughly about a general how the deployments unfold, and then I'll talk about sort of specifically Turkey and a few incidents in Turkey. So we stand for Search and Rescue Assistance in Disasters, and we were formed 20 years ago in response to the 2004 tsunami in Southeast Asia. So our founders, that was their first deployment over there, and then off the back of that continued to form this organization to respond to disasters around the world. So just a bit of an outline of who we are. We respond to disasters around the world, regardless of political persuasion, creed, religion, or colour. So we're all volunteers. We all come from different walks of life, and I think that's what makes us quite special and unique. We're not gung-ho, sort of all military, all from the fire service. Everyone we've got teachers, farmers, carers, woodworkers, builders, and everyone brings their own unique set of skills. So that is quite special in its own right, I think. We're a non-government organisation, so that gives us a bit of flexibility politically of where and when we can deploy, and we're purely funded by donations, so we don't receive any funding from the Disaster Emergency Committee, the DEC, or Oxfam. So again, gives us a bit of flexibility to how we operate. And we might be volunteers, but we are trained to a very high standard. We give up quite a lot of our time, a lot of training weekends every month. So Friday evening, we head down to a fire station somewhere, usually in Bristol, Bath area, and we train all weekend. And then twice a year, we have a week-long exercise. So we are quite closely tied to the fire service. We get to use a lot of their training grounds. So yeah, we might be volunteers, but that doesn't mean we're not trained to a high level. So some of our previous deployments, so I'll try very much to not use too many acronyms, but one I can't avoid is USAR. So that's USAR, which is Urban Search and Rescue. So we've had several large deployments on a urban search and rescue capacity. So the tsunami in Southeast Asia, our team were out in Sri Lanka, Pakistan, earthquake, and probably the two big ones on there you'll recognize is Haiti in 2010 and Nepal in 2015. In recent years, we've added another string to our bow and looked at what we call the beyond the rubble pile phase. So that's once the initial search and rescue operations have been completed, when that window of survival has closed, unfortunately, there is still large amount of destruction, a lot of people displaced from their homes. So we've set up a system to use the skills of the engineers from the search and rescue teams and the local engineers, and put together a system called the damage assessment coordination phase, which has now been implemented by the UN as a standard practice. So this was trialed it was inspired, I should say, off the back of a deployment to the British Virgin Islands in response to the Hurricane Irma, and then put into practice in Albania and Lebanon, and then really finely tuned in Haiti. So for what we jokingly refer to ourselves as a bunch of amateurs, it's quite something we're proud of, that we've managed to put this together. And that's purely because we're quite unique in that we've got a lot of engineers in the team. A lot of teams have one or two engineers to sort of feed into the team, whereas we're probably about 40%. So that gives us quite a wide base of engineering skill set to sort of really feed into this. And then we've also undertaken some resilience missions in Nepal. After the earthquake, we went out and trained the monks and scouts. It was noted that they were the people to sort of stay in their villages. A lot of the sort of adult males and women went off to towns to get work, whereas the scouts and monks were ever present in the villages. So they were a good target audience to train up in search and rescue in response to the earthquake. And we did some training in Moldova for the fire service. We operate under the United Nations. So in 1988, there was an earthquake in Armenia. A lot of teams went out, and it sounded like it was just a bit of chaos. Teams from all around the world turned up, searched the same buildings multiple times, and the UN took put their foot down and said, right, this needs to be organised better. And that was the birth of SARAID, the International Search and Rescue Advisory Group. So that's the main UN umbrella that we work under. And as you can see, there's a lot of acronyms, but in every one of those, there's a C, and that C stands for coordination. And that's really key to what the UN provide throughout that whole umbrella is coordination. So I'll touch on that as we talk about the Turkey deployment. But one of the key things is to operate under that umbrella, you need to be peer reviewed to show that you are capable. And throughout the last 30 years of their history, they've only had this classification for medium and heavy teams. So the heavy teams have around 120 people, medium around 70, large amounts of kit. So the heavy teams will probably deploy with their own Boeing 747. The UAE teams have multiple Boeings that they will land. In Turkey, actually, there's a heavy team, an Israeli team that had 200 doctors with them, an entire field hospital. So that's really the sort of scale they were looking at. And we never fit under that bracket. There's only 50 of us in our team. When we deploy, we'll deploy with around 23 team members. So we finally petitioned the UN, and they've agreed that these light teams, what we can provide is rapid deployment. So we have 1.5 tons of kit. We can get there first. In Haiti, we were on the ground on the rubble whilst all the large teams were stuck at the airport trying to get their planes on the damaged runway. So there is a real need for these small teams. So we were very proud to be the first light team in the UK. So we did a big exercise last year where we had assessors from all around the world come and review our medical capability, our logistics, our engineering skills, a vast sort of curriculum of skills we needed to demonstrate. And off the back of it, years of hard work, but we got this nice badge with the United Nations logo on it, which opened a few doors to us. So that's another thing we're very proud of. And so part of doing that, we partnered up with AtFire. So AtFire, you'll see throughout the photos in Turkey, are a German team, very similar to us, volunteers from all walks of life, and equally classified as a light team. So we on deployments tend to partner up with them just because our skill sets are similar. So I just thought mention that here. And then myself, I'm a USAR engineer. So there's many roles within the team, as you can imagine. There's medics, management, and the engineer is a specific role within that. So I use my day job skill set, understanding the load paths of structures, and then we are responsible for the safety of the team to try and assess the safest access route into a building making sure that our team are safe. If we do find a casualty, how we extricate the casualty, moving them through the structure, and if it is unstable, putting in temporary shoring. So that's a little timber structure there, sort of the example of what the shoring might look like. So the earthquakes in Turkey and Syria, and I'll just touch on Syria now. I think everyone's probably aware that the political situation prevented a lot of search and rescue teams getting on the ground in there. There was equal amount of destruction in the north of Syria, but we were deployed to Turkey. So yeah, thoughts are with the people of Syria, and but this presentation will focus on our deployment to Turkey. So there were 3 earthquakes, and without boring you of the details of earthquakes, they were earthquakes in their own right. So rather than one large earthquake and subsequent aftershocks, they were separate events. So from the coast down here in Hatay up to Kahramanmaraş, about 200 miles long. So we talk about, you hear about epicenters of earthquakes, and people give a sort of a pinpoint location. This almost happened across a long 200-mile slip. So for that superimposed on the UK, you can see just the vast scale of this disaster. And these are, so Turkey sits on quite a few fault lines. So it's this East Anatolian fault line that slipped. So nearly the whole length of that fault line down here moved. So just some statistics, and pretty horrible statistics. The last revised number was over 53,000 people recorded to have died. I think the big number there is 2.5 million people displaced. So that's 2.5 million people without homes for quite a considerable time. They're living in tents with no real new home on the horizon for a long time. And again, just to give some context to that earthquake, this is a bit of a chart that shows some of the largest earthquakes and destructive events in history. And you don't need to understand it, but the 3 bars show that not only were they significant earthquakes, there were sort of 3 very significant earthquakes. So piled on top of each other, that's where we saw a lot of the damage, was because the initial earthquake weakened the structures, and then these second ones just caused them to collapse. And this gives you an idea of that slip plane, just how much movement there was. So this is the Hatay Rift. These 2 parts of the orchard were next to each other at one point, and you can just see where the ground is quite literally just torn apart. So incredible amount of energy released in doing so. So SARAID as a team, we're on standby 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Our bags are constantly packed, much to the annoyance of my wife, while my bags are always left around the house ready to go. And we have an online system that alerts us to any earthquakes. And in the modern day, I think Twitter and social media is equally good as that system. So the disaster strikes initially. One of our colleagues working at a research, it sounds like something from a film, working at a research laboratory in Canada, was still awake at the time and called our team leader and gave him the heads up and said, there's been a pretty big earthquake. I think this might require your attention. So the earthquakes happened local time around 4 a.m, the initial one on Monday, and then the subsequent one was about 9:30. So the timings of those earthquakes are quite important to us on a search and rescue team. So at 4 a.m, people are going to be at home in their beds, whereas during the day you'd expect people to be at work in their offices or children to be in school. So that really that sort of tells us where to focus. So residential blocks were sort of key to our search efforts, whereas sort of commercial buildings, schools were sort of lower down on the priority list. So once we've got the incoming information, it's all hands on deck really. There's a huge amount of work to do. We probably, of those deployments I showed you earlier, there's probably about 5 times that number of deployments where we have been mobilized or on standby, where we've not actually deployed. So it's quite difficult to there's a lot of, it feels like, not crying wolf, but that's the wrong term, but it happens quite a lot. You can be sort of numb to it, that okay, are we going to deploy this time? Probably not. How big's this event? But I think this one, actually very rapidly we realized this was go time. So we have a team of people looking at flights, people looking at the information that's coming out of the UN, and a whole other sort of raft of people looking at insurance, people down at the stores getting the kit ready. There's a lot of to do. And there's a saying in search and rescue that the hardest part is not drilling the wall, but getting the drill to the wall. And I think that really does sum up this initial mobilization phase, that so many of our deployments fail before we've even taken off, where we quite literally can't get to the place in time, or there's some bureaucracy or red tape preventing us. So we're put on standby. This is when the team are told who's likely to deploy. So I was given the nod at that point, sent away to pack my bags, tie up any loose ends with work. So this was Monday morning. It was actually quite a light bulb memory for me, actually. I hadn't checked my phone that morning. I was driving my 2 boys to nursery, and was listening to the radio, and it just came on the news about an earthquake, and it didn't really sink in. And then it said, oh, Mark Scorer from SARAID is he's here to tell us more. And that's one of my colleagues. I thought, oh dear, something's happening. So quickly asked my lad to pass him with my phone when we got to nursery, and realized I had about 150 unread messages, that there's a lot going on. So we tried to get flights. There was snow in Istanbul that prevented a lot of flights. There was no flights landing in Istanbul, which really did hamper our efforts to get over there. So the next available flights we could get onto were Tuesday morning. So as you can imagine, that search window really does rely on those first sort of 5 days where people are still alive and trapped. So getting there quickly is really key. And we're similarly quite unique in that we only deploy if we receive a request from the host nation. A lot of teams, or some teams around the world, like to just deploy. They possibly aren't very well trained. They don't have a full understanding of the picture, and often cause sort of more harm and hassle than actual benefit. So we will only deploy if we've got a written invitation from the host nation, which can be quite challenging to receive. So Turkey put out a request for assistance, but for some unknown reason, through the UN system, they only requested heavy and medium teams. So we're sitting there with our nice new blue badge from the UN, pleased as punch that we've got it. And then the first big incident, we were technically not invited to. So it took quite a few hours to speak to the right people to get them to realize that they had made, it was a genuine mistake. They just hadn't included light on that. So once they changed the wording, we had our invite, and we could actually get on the road. But small things like that you'd think would not sort of not that critical, but it really does affect how we can deploy. So because we were sort of operating without that proper invitation, we only initially deployed a team of 8. We got the invite as we were at the airport. So the second wave of our team were then mobilized. So in the first wave, was myself as the engineer. We had four technicians, a medic, and our 2 team leaders, and Sam, who's our specialist in the UN coordination. So he his task was to work with all the other UN teams, which we'll talk about. And then once we were in country, that's when we were officially deployed, and we have operational disciplines. So we are completely self-sufficient. We take all our own water, we take all our own food, we take sleeping equipment. So we're not a burden on the host country. As you can imagine, this is a situation where people have lost everything, where potentially water and food is scarce. We don't want to be going in there creating another burden on that strained system. So everything we take is to make sure we're self-sufficient. Once we're in country, the first team in country sets up a reception departure center. That's one of the UN coordination disciplines. That team liaise with the local airport, and really small, sort of what you'd think were mundane things, just sort of getting bags to the right part of the airport. For a bit of context, the airport in Turkey saw 86 teams come through it, all varying in size from 150 to 50. So a lot of international people arriving with dogs, with large equipment, with plant and machinery. So all of that has to find somewhere at the airport, and all of that needs onward travel. So buses, lorries, the roads are often damaged. So it's quite a significant task just getting people in and out of the airport. We also have our UK support team, so that it's a bit of the guys on the ground and the tip of the iceberg. We have a huge team working round the clock, really, in the UK. So this is Sarah in our stores, putting together maps for us, working out routes. We have people pulling in together all the information from different various online sources, putting that onto online maps for us. Engineers providing country briefs, so telling us what the typical construction makeup is, any sort of typical hazards, what the local building regulations are like, who's responsible for building control. So whilst we're on our way on the plane, this is all sort of what we're feeding or trying to pick up on, trying to make sure when we get on the ground we've got a good idea what we're dealing with. So despite only having 8 of us, and there being a lot of teams coming through with much bigger teams, we donated one of our team members to the reception departure center at the airport. So it's a bit of a bugbear of ours that the smaller teams end up having to do this, but we so this shows you all the incoming teams. You get notification of when they're arriving, how many people are coming in, where they're going to next. So this was really the sort of the nerve center of getting people in. Chris here from our team, I don't think he got much more than half an hour sleep. I think he literally just slept on the floor there, and was just on the go for sort of 5 days straight. So we were lucky enough to get a bus once we landed in Adana, so down sort of on that southwest corner of the fault line, and then a drive up to Kahraman Maraş. So I apologize, I thought I had a map at hand. So this is sort of Adana down here where we landed, and then Maraş is up here. So where you've got the slip line along here, massive amount of damage down in Hatay, and then Maraş up in the mountainous area where we were heading up here. Typically would have been around a 45-minute journey, and quite frustratingly for us, it took about 8 hours in total. The couple of roads through the tunnels were blocked by damage. There was a large viaduct that was out of action, so just vast queues of people getting out of the damaged area. you can see the sort of the destruction. It's a very bad photo because the windows of the bus were quite dirty, but this sort of train track, I think we took this from online, just completely buckled. This is sort of the state of some of the roads on the way, and this is a really interesting photo of where this red line of pavers would have been in the same line at one point, and it's just completely shunted across. So as we traveled, I think that 8 hours on the bus, it was frustrating, and that was when the nerves started to kick in as you see more and more damage. As we arrived in Marash, temperatures were very, very cold. At night we were getting down to about -12, not breaking above 0 during the day. So for these people that had lost their homes, they were literally just burning sort of any debris to keep themselves warm just on the streets. And you can see the snow, so there was a dusting of snow that had fallen since the earthquake as well. So typically what would happen was we would arrive, coordinate with the USAR coordination cell, who would give us a search area. We would go out normally on the back of a Jeep or whatever vehicle we could, and do a real sort of rough, hasty search, drive around that sector, identify where the sort of main damage is, what buildings could have what we call survivable voids. So where a building is completely collapsed in on itself, there's not much chance of people surviving that, but where the building perhaps sort of falls over to one side and you get those gaps between the slabs, that's what we're looking out for, where there's potentially people that have survived in those gaps. So you do a rough and ready search, identify which buildings are priorities, and then you go back, do a targeted search. If you get a live hit of a casualty, that's when you do the rescue stage. They say no plan survives first contact with the enemy, and that really was the case in this instance. So we arrived in Marash. The stadium is the kind of focus point of the city centre downtown, and you can just see that it's just wiped out. Nearly every building has gone. So there was quite a helpful article on the BBC subsequently of this area, and it highlights all these purple buildings are completely flattened. So no chance of doing a primary search. Every building is a potential survivable voids. We had contact from our German partner team at Fire that they'd got on the ground 12 hours before us, and they were on a live rescue site. So we had a phone call with them. They said, come and meet us. So instantly we were, instead of trying to get our own search site, they were in pieces. They'd been awake, but including traveling for about 36 hours. It just wasn't safe for them to continue. So we got a briefing from them and worked on that site. So this is the first site. This building here is what it looked like originally, and this is what it was left with. So a quick handover with Fire. They'd spent the day, they'd heard noises, they'd had voice communication with a family inside here. They tried going between the slabs. They'd hit a radiator, so they were just very slow progress trying to get through this radiator. They still weren't absolutely sure that they were on the other side of that radiator. Temperatures were dropping, so this was around 5 in the evening. We knew daylight was fading, and with that the temperature would drop. So the time was running out when we as the light faded, we'd lost contact with them. So they'd had contact for a few hours and then contact had gone. So whether they were cold, they'd lost consciousness, we don't know, but we sort of everything clicked up a gear, and we knew we were running out of time. So this is the original ground level. You can see here an excavator here just providing a bit of reassurance for some of this loose rubble. We had intel from a local construction worker who had actually built the apartment block that there was a basement. So we came up with a plan to excavate down in front of the building, get into the basement, and then try and breach upwards. So using the excavator, dug a big sort of trench in front of the building, and then we were digging literally through the earth, the mud, trying to find this basement wall. So that's just digging with shovels. The local construction workers all turned up and pitched in, and then there's some sort of real rough and ready shoring. I think the slab, we were quite confident that the slab was going to bridge that tunnel and was safe. So the shoring was more just for sort of psychological purposes. And then eventually found this concrete wall. So we breached through that with a drill and a breaker, and we found the void in the basement. Once we got through there, we used one of our main bits of kit, which is the snake cam. So it's a camera on a pole, essentially. The pole can extend around about 20 foot. It's got a live relay, so it connects to a tablet via Bluetooth, and you can talk, or if you find someone, you can communicate with them. It's got a big torch on it. So we put the camera in. We still haven't had any contact with them for a few hours now, so things were getting quite fraught. And then this is the camera being put up through the rubble. So there's a lot of just debris as the slab collapsed down. Suddenly we got voices, we heard shouting. Quickly called over the translator. We started sort of conversing back with the lady, and then there's this great moment when the hand reached out and we knew we'd made actual contact. So we knew we had a live casualty. It was a mother with her daughter, 7-year-old daughter. So we managed to use the camera again to post up some water, some space blankets, while we sort of came up with a revised plan to get access to her. So I think that's actually just the same video. So at this moment, sort of word spread around with large crowds. It was quite chaotic, quite difficult to find the space to work. We sent someone in with a reciprocal saw to cut away a lot of the pipes, clear away the debris, and then one of our medics was down in the tunnel just clearing the debris when he just looked up and the little girl quite literally crawled her way down through the rubble. She'd saw where we were and just squeezed her way down. So yeah, hugely emotional for us and the crowd. So cleared some more rubble to make a larger space. So this was Wednesday evening. So she'd been trapped in there since Monday morning. Yeah, a lot of her family, her brother was outside, he'd survived, and yeah, he was obviously ecstatic that she was out. And it's not all sort of fairy tale ending. So we went back in to continue to explore the void, and her husband and another child were still in there. yeah, so that's quite tough to take. So we moved. That was it's a bit of a baptism of fire, really, straight off the bus with no real sort of briefing. So we headed back to the base area. This is our base of operations, so nothing glamorous, just purely tents, a large open compound. So there was a lot of aftershocks, still some quite significant aftershocks. So we don't want to be around any buildings. So we were up away out of the city centre, large field provided to us by the local emergency management agency, and that's where all the international teams congregated. So about minus 12 at night, pretty miserable conditions. Just our tents and a camping stove, really. And then this is Sam. So Sam then was attached to the UN coordination team. So AFAD, who are the local emergency management agency, Turkey are very well prepared for events like this. They have been expecting earthquakes, if you can imagine, with those fault lines around the perimeter of the country. It's for them, it wasn't if, it was when this happens. So yeah, credit to them. They had these vehicles deployed within hours that open up into these offices, internet connection. We could download maps, sectorize the city. So Sam got stuck into breaking the city up into small chunks that we could then assign to teams to go and search. So this became, I think, where the UN system probably fell apart a bit, was that normally we're talking about one city, one coordination cell, but because there was that sort of 200-mile long slip, there were multiple cities. So instead of just having one, there were 10 different sector coordination cells, all sort of trying to do their own thing, sectorize up cities. So yeah, huge amount of coordination across that area. So this was Karam and Marash broken up into sectors of the sort of the downtown area in the middle here, with the sort of the bigger devastation, and these outer areas less damage, and just a bit of sort of a flavour of the that coordination. So every team has their team leaders. The local agencies have all their leaders. Everyone. Multiple meetings throughout the day, trying to coordinate where people need to be. So we've got people literally phoning up the emergency hotline saying they've heard reports of people in this building, or there's sort of some signs of life, and then trying to filter that through down to the teams to get people out where they're needed as a huge task. So next, so this is now Thursday, we're tasked with, so these are some sort of key buildings where people had, there'd been signs of life or reports. And I think this was the bit, we do a lot of training, some really good, really realistic training that prepared us quite well, but I don't think I was prepared for the way that information is coming in. So as you can imagine, people, they've lost their loved ones, they're just clinging on to hope that they might be someone in there. So if they see a team, they're very, very happy or excited to get you to come over to try and search their house. Some of the information you're getting is not quite accurate. There might be some sort of exaggerations or bit misleading with the timings. So sometimes people say, oh, we heard noises, or we've just heard them, and then through the translator you work out that actually no one's been heard in there for 2 days, or it was just a mobile phone that they heard ringing, or an alarm clock that went off. So we obviously still have to think about our own safety. We won't go into a building unless there is a live hit, if we have actual confirmation of a live person in there. So we do a lot of searching from the outside before we put ourselves in harm's way or in danger. So this was quite tricky, trying to filter through that information to work out where we were actually needed. So another bit of our kit is this Savox DELSAR. So it's a seismic acoustic listening device. So along with the search camera and these are our two essential bits of equipment. So you can see down here, these are little very, very highly sensitive sensors that will pick up vibrations on from any sound or movement. So you place these out across the structure. So we were up here putting them on the structure. The wires then go back to this central box, and you can pick up any vibrations. So in training, we have someone one side of the building, and you're literally scratching with your fingernail across the concrete, and those vibrations are sort of able to be picked up by the machine. So you want to place it on something sort of large and structural, hoping that if there's anyone in the building, you place them all out and you shout, can you hear me? If you can, sort of bang, and you hope that they bang. And then we do another test where we sort of bang in a pattern. So you sort of and then you hope that they recognize that it's a pattern and bang back, as opposed to just sort of generic banging from sort of any machinery. So this was again quite a challenge. We do a lot of training on this, but it was nothing like the real thing, where we sort of put all these sensors out and then suddenly realize we're listening out for a person potentially trapped. You're picking up all sorts of noises. There's sort of reports of people picking up what they think is a casualty and breaching down to find a refrigerator. So the compressor of a refrigerator might be sort of clanging. People might mistake that for a noise. So it was very challenging trying to work out if you were getting a live hit or not. So more taskings, more responding to reports. I think this one was quite another moment that sort of struck home a bit, was that these two women sort of approached with North London accents, and they would come over to try and find their mum. So they were used to live in the area but now lived in London, and them just sort of asking us to help in a British London accent sort of made it really strike home a lot harder. That's another sort of before and after. This was a work site where we weren't actually needed, but there was you can see here the sort of middle story still intact. So the large workforce on top trying to breach down through a couple of layers of debris to get into this area that potentially had some live people in. And then at night time, things took on a sort of completely different feel. People burning fires to keep warm, and in the darkness, people tended to an air of panic tended to take over. It really did feel quite different at night time. It was quite quite different to the daytime. It was quite difficult working conditions. So this was just another one of our taskings. We got assigned a couple of sectors on the edge of the city, so just driving around trying to find if there were any buildings that needed searching. It's quite frustrating, quite a long day with not really feeling like we were doing much of value, just driving around areas that were not damaged, just to confirm that there was no damage. And then in the evening, we just heading back to base when we got a call saying a local team had potentially a live hit, and they needed a team with the DELSAR, the listening device. So we were deployed out. This is the building, how it looked beforehand, and this is the state that it was in. So I took this photo when we arrived, but later on, so just sort of bear in mind this area here. So we've got this is where we ended up working. So we've got all of this rubble probably about 6 stories of the sort of slab, quite precariously balanced. Well, not precariously balanced, but just sat here and then sort of sloping down the hill. So we put out the listening devices. We were with our German team and did the usual. We had one of the local teams shout where they thought they'd heard the noise, and heard absolutely nothing. So I was some distance away from where we thought the noise was. There was just a nice big open slab. So you tend to bang on something that's quite structural. So I knocked on that slab, and instantly we got a knock back. So Susie, who was on the listening device, I think her body language gave away more than anything else. Her sort of eyes went sort of wide open, and she was pretty sure what she'd heard was someone knock back. So we did more testing, called again, more banging, and heard nothing. So we were sure there was someone there, but we just couldn't. So typically you would keep repeating it and then sort of hone in and triangulate on where you think the noise is, and then try and then breach down to find them. But we just had nothing coming back, so kept scattering the devices around. So it's quite frustrating. So we worked with this, said to the local team, there's something there, why don't you use the excavator to peel back the first slab, and we'll come back and do the test again. As they, just purely by chance, as they pulled away the first slab, we saw some hair sticking out through the hole. So we ran down, and there was a girl trapped under the slab. So I think I actually forgot to say the classification exercise we spent last year on the curriculum was a crush patient. So patient with injuries to their lower legs, crushed by concrete, and sort of treating them and removing them from the rubble pile. So that was a sort of the task I got sort of tasked with on the exercise. I trained it probably about 10 times over the course of last year in various situations, and then sort of lo and behold, we're sort of on the ground in real life, and the exact same scenario as what we trained. Patient, crush injuries to her lower legs, trapped under the concrete. So really sort of training just kicked in, sort of almost second nature, thankfully, that we knew exactly what to do. So I was partnered up with one of the German guys who was a medic. So I took the structural engineering role, and he was the medic. So we had this whole sort of slab on top of her, covered in debris. It was quite clearly quite damaged from underneath, quite fragile. And then sort of looking up, so this is, so up to the left hand side, this is what was sort of in front of us. So all of this quite unstable debris, potentially sliding down the slope towards us. So it was quite key to secure the area, make sure that the rubble didn't fall on top of her anymore, and to make sure that our team was safe whilst doing so. This is after she was actually removed. So she was actually in sort of in here. So this bed, this sort of bed frame that probably saved her life, that she said she got, she woke up, went to run to her mother's room, and then the sort of the building collapsed. So she sort of was next to her bed, and yeah, this small void that she was able to stay in. So she was incredibly coherent, considering this was Friday evening, and so she'd been there since Monday morning, completely trapped, unable to move, her legs pinned. She was quite chatted to us about her books, which also probably contributed to saving her. A sort of big pile of books beside her bed. Asked us, we were sort of quite sort of gung-ho in pulling all the books out, and she sort of stopped and said, "Can you please save my Harry Potter books? I don't want you to damage my Harry Potter books." So we had to bag those up to take with her. And then yeah, there was a radiator here, and a window frame that was preventing us getting her out. So cut away the radiator, removed a lot of the rubble, and then as you can just about see it underneath here, this is a metal prop. So I had to crawl in to put this prop in just to secure that slab. while we removed the radiator, because we weren't sure if the radiator was supporting the slab. And then, so I think this is just the sort of small space we were able to get into. And then you can just about see wrapped in some blankets in that in this corner here. So it took quite a long time, probably about 6 hours in total. She was obviously very cold, very sort of fragile. We managed to get enough space for the local medics to get in. So part of our sort of ethos is we try not to, despite the previous video, try not to sort of, it's not our rescue. It's the local teams. We let them sort of take the rescue, and we're just there to provide support or sort of any sort of technical specialism. So we made sure it's the local medics and the local rescue team that sort of enacted the rescue. And then again, just it was like a crowded bar on a Friday night with people trying to get into the workspace. Lots of people, really difficult environment. Many different teams, Austrian team, German team, a couple of Turkish teams. So it's quite challenging. Eventually we got her stabilized, got some fluids into her through an IV, managed to cut away the bits of furniture that were trapping her legs, and it weren't as crushed as we initially expected, so possibly just a broken leg. Out onto a stretcher and then out to the hospital. And we had a report a few days later from the local team that she was doing well, and yeah, would make a full recovery. So good, a good outcome. And again, it's not all fairy tale endings. So she was in the building with her mother. So we knew from talking to her that where sort of her bedroom was, where her mum's room was, and that her mum was in the building as well. So we continued sort of throughout the night, more searches, kept peeling away the concrete, but just couldn't find her mum. So yeah, from a high to a low again. And then the final work site, this was on the last day, so our full team were all deployed to this one area. It was a bit of it become a bit renowned, this site. There have been rumours going around amongst the sort of the locals and reports that there was a basement with 25 people trapped in. There was some information that they'd made phone calls. We managed to sort of identify that it was these apartment blocks. So you can see there's these sort of many apartment blocks next to each other, and this was all that was left of them. Every single one was just completely gone. So quite a massive area, many sort of hundreds of apartment blocks just gone. It's a pretty significant work site. So this is taken from a drone. So this was the building where there was these rumors of 25 people located, and then this building over to the corner was a subsequent work site. So we arrived, were told that there was a live voices coming from this building. So we sort of went over here with our equipment, tried to get our listening equipment in there, but it was impossible to get a reading. There was just too much other noise going on. So we called in a Swiss dog team who sent dogs all over the pile, and yeah, that was quite incredible to watch the sort of the bravery of not just the dogs but the dog handlers getting themselves into some pretty dicey situations. But the dogs didn't indicate, there was no way they could pick up anything, so that was quite frustrating. And then back to the original site. So there's sort of this large retaining wall across the back. So you've got sort of the three sides of the perimeter. It had been searched a day before by a French team that were unable to get to this corner. So you've got all this loose rubble from one building, all the loose rubble from another. We sort of nicknamed it Slightly Uncomfortable Alley, after some sort of more explicit nicknames during the actual day. But so right down here was this sort of reports of where these people were. So we set up with the German team, French team, our listening equipment all around the building, and there were, by this point, sort of 6 days in, there was large amounts of sort of excavators removing the rubble. So every time we wanted to listen, we had to stop. Probably about sort of 300, 400 people, about 20 excavators, all had to stop, stand there, absolute silence. You can't move your feet. You can imagine if you're moving your feet, sort of you're making noise on the rubble that could be picked up. So and yeah, credit to the locals. They really did just do exactly as we were asked of them, and it's quite incredible to have you blow a whistle and 400 people stand still in silence for 10 minutes. So we set out the listening devices, and this was sort of one of our guys sort of in the bottom of the building putting out the listening device. So not a particularly nice place to be. So yeah, trying to get access to sort of the significant bit of the structure to place the device on. And yeah, no, eventually we didn't get any information or live hits on the listening equipment. So I think on one hand it's disappointing. On the other hand, I think it's sort of reassuring that we could manage to sort of give everyone, all the locals, confirmation that we had checked it, and that yeah, there weren't people still stuck down there. So not necessarily a waste of time. And then this is the extent of our team. So the full team that deployed in the end. And yeah, we were really lucky. We were assigned this bus driver and his mate. They were only expecting to drive us from the airport up to Marash. We asked them, they dropped us off when we made that first rescue. They saw what we were doing. We asked them to provide a bus for us for the rest of our deployment, and they said yes. So they had nothing more than the clothes on their back. They were just happy to help out. And our translator, who similarly, he turned up at the airport to just provide some assistance at the airport, left his 7-day-old baby at home with his wife. I told her he was just going up to the airport, and ended up being with us for 5 days, and didn't actually tell his wife he'd left the airport. So yeah. And then just some final thoughts. So I think this was a disaster on an unprecedented scale. What you might have read in the paper, some sort of negative things about the sort of the Turkish response, but I think this was such a large scale that no country in the world would have been able to be properly prepared for it. Well, Turkey were properly prepared, would have been able to handle that level of devastation. The Turkish teams and the country were very well prepared, and they still couldn't keep up with it. In the worst of circumstances, you see humanity at its finest. So the locals, their bravery and resilience in continuing to search in pretty awful conditions was incredible. And yeah, all the nations of the search teams, so the 86 countries sent teams working we were working together, English, French, German, Israeli, Swiss, Armenian, all working together without sort of any politics. So yeah, probably see humanity at its best. And yeah, this is just sort of the first inch on a very long road to recovery. There's going to be people displaced from their homes for many years. So it might be out of the headlines, the newspaper attention has moved on, but this issue is still ongoing. And just that the small charities on the ground, it is a continuing humanitarian disaster. So supporting people on the ground out there to help these people is really effective. And one final thought is that this was in the southeast of Turkey. As we flew out, this is Istanbul, and this is what we have been preparing for, and all the search teams are still preparing for, is Istanbul. So this sits on a fault line, and again, it's not when it goes, so not if it goes, it's when. So yeah, pretty sobering thought that every single one of those buildings is on an equally destructive fault line and at risk. So we need to stay prepared. So thanks for your time, thanks for listening, and happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much, Alec. That was quite inspirational. As you say, it was headlines for 2 or 3 weeks, and we've all moved on and to some other crisis or something else which we think is more important. And thanks for agreeing to answer questions. I'm sure there'll be lots. Pam Mackay has already got her hand up, I see.
Thank you. My son works for the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, and since having to cut one of his own colleagues out of a building several years ago, he's seen the development of really good counselling support for people who are involved in any kind of traumatic situation. Does your organisation have any kind of support built in?
Yeah, so because a lot of our guys are in the fire service, we've actually been picked up probably by that same system. So we've been picked up by Avon, Fire and Rescues, Trauma, Incident Management. So yeah, I think similarly, some of our guys in Haiti had some pretty horrific situations that they've sort of learned from, and yeah, sort of there was a process in place before we even left the country to sort of how we would be dealt with. So that was quite reassuring. Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah, thanks.
Any other questions, Dottie?
Yeah, it's not so much a question. Thank you for that talk. It's absolutely incredible. And the admiration for the likes of your organisation and many, many others is amazing. It's just to say that you mentioned Istanbul, and in, I believe it was 1998 or 99, they had that last big earthquake. And at the time, my husband David was out there living and working. And I just arrived on the Saturday afternoon to stay for a holiday. Our daughter was already there doing work experience. She was 18. And they had this major earthquake, and which hit about 3 a.m., I believe, on the Saturday morning. And he was very fortunate because he was living in a little village just outside Istanbul, where there's major devastation, called Yenikoy. And all I can remember was suddenly waking up and the house was just shaking, and it was amazing. And our daughter thought I was shaking her bed. And she said, "Stop shaking my bed." I said, "I'm nowhere near your bed." I said, "Oops." I said, "There's an earthquake." I said, "Quick, get dressed." And we got dressed. And fortunately, David was living in a house which had been built by a Turkish engineer who actually lived in Germany. And he built his house to withstand earthquakes. And it was in like a steel cage. And it shook, obviously. But where we were was, it didn't see great devastation because there weren't many high-rise. It was a very old village. But all I can remember is the hordes of people who came out from Istanbul because it was deemed as safe. And all the cafes opened up and everything. And they were just dishing out free food, free drinks and everything. And the support that everyone was giving each other was totally amazing. But it was sad to see in this recent earthquake where they had the same complaints, if you like, of the buildings which fell, which they had 20 years ago. And it seemed as if they were claimed to be earthquake proof, but they weren't. And it just makes you wonder. I'm sure that somehow the devastation would have been less, I think, if everyone conformed when building to the right kind of building regs. But it was a thing you never forget. But so just as I say, full of admiration for what you and people like you just go out there at times like this and just try and help.
Thanks.
So thank you.
Thanks. So the I think that was Izmir in, was it 99, I think, or 98? So the building regs were actually updated in 2000. So everything built after 2000 should have been more earthquake prone. So there is a graph that shows the sort of the spectrum of shaking, and the building regs sort of show a curve this big, and then the actual one was sort of this big. So whether or not some people cut corners, and there were some badly built ones, but even if they were built to the regs, many of them wouldn't have survived. So the specific sort of pattern would have affected buildings in the 8 to 12 story range, which is what we were working with. So yeah, I think there might be some poor building practices, but I think even so, those buildings in that 8 to 12 story range didn't stand a chance, unfortunately. So
Peter Latham, you're muted, Peter.
Yes, thanks for that talk. It was yes, quite emotional and inspirational. One question I would ask is, with modern technology, how now are you able to rescue those, I presume few people are actually caught in such a disaster, actually within the building when they collapse? I presume most die. Of those that miraculously escape, with modern technology and the efforts of yourselves and organisations such as yours, are you able to save many of those that could be potentially saved if we had a perfect world with perfect equipment to detect where these people were and perfect equipment to get at them? So what I'm saying is, of those that potentially could be saved, how many of those that potentially could be saved are you saving with your efforts?
I'm not sure. So I think the key is the timing, really, more than the equipment. So that window of survivability, especially in the sort of cold weather. Although there were people rescued in Marash even up to 8 days later. So I think the timing is probably key to getting teams there as quick as possible. But I guess, I don't know, my honest answer is I don't think it's possible to ever know. So the next stage, once the search is complete, you go through a process called delamination. So you literally just sort of layer by layer removing the rubble and removing the bodies, essentially. So you would probably not be able to know whether those people were sort of had survived and were not rescued, or whether they were killed in the first instance. But I'd say, especially with sort of touching on the modern technology, I think the smartphone and the mobile phone has sort of changed the way we operate, really. There were a lot of reports of people, who were trapped, and had they been able to get to their phones or been able to turn their phones on and let people know they were trapped. So that's probably changed the way that we respond to it. Whereas traditionally we would have gone through that process of looking for survivable voids and just putting the DELSAR on. Now it's responding to information coming in from people themselves that have reported that they're trapped.
Alex, is Gordon again. How many UK teams are out there?
So there was 3 in total. So the UK ISAR is the fire service team, the government team. They sent a team of 75 in total. They went out on the Wednesday, and then another small charity similar to us deployed on the Friday, I think. So 2 search and rescue teams. So yeah, we were smaller, but got there before the ISAR team.
Coordination is obviously quite a challenge with teams from all over the world with different languages, different cultures, different priorities. Who is actually coordinating?
So it depends on the country, really. So in this instance, because Turkey are so well prepared, it's AFAD, the AFAD, they're the local emergency management agency. So they, whereas we fall under the UN umbrella, in somewhere like Haiti, where there is no sort of local management agency, the UN would sort of step in, whereas in sort of Turkey, they've very well prepared themselves. So AFAD took the lead, and the UN were just more of a advisory. That being said, though, there was a lot of sort of things that we managed. Yeah, at that they did need some advising, and there were ways that we managed to use the UN system to improve their the way they were operating. So, like I said, when Sam got involved at the coordination centre, he sort of put together the sectorisation map, put together sort of assigning that to different teams. So that was really that was led by us and the UN. But overall, it's the AFAD.
Yeah. Okay, one last question for Alex. No one? No.
You said at the beginning that you're a charity and you're funded entirely by donations. Where do these donations come from? Large organisations or individuals?
Mostly individuals. Yeah, we I think off the back of the sort of social media and sort of the press, it's mostly small individual donations. A couple of sort of companies have made some sort of like smaller, well, larger donations, but yeah, it's primarily individual donations. Really, we don't have any corporate backing or of that sort. So
no government grants, Alex? Nothing
from the nope. So the deck is quite a sort of a bit of a bone of contention for us when everyone supports the deck. To be qualified to receive money from the Disasters Emergency Committee, you need a revenue of over £3 million a year. So once you've received £3 million from the deck, you're eligible to receive it again. But until you're on that list, so it's that money kind of gets funneled into the same charities over and again. So no, we're just purely from our support network, really.
Yeah.
Alec, if you could send to us the details of your charity, we'll put it out on social media. Your talk has been recorded and will be published on YouTube, and we normally get about 3 times as many watching it on YouTube as watching tonight. We'll attach your charity details to that as well. Okay, appreciate that. Thank you. Thanks again, Alex. And can I just say that next month we've got another opportunity to share a special evening when Lord Salisbury will be delivering a talk in Hatfield House, his home and his family's home for the last 500 years, I think. It's a home with a remarkable history, and he has decided to deliver that talk himself. So that should be fascinating. So that just leaves me to invite you all to toast the King, Rotary, and all those that are living in some very challenging parts of the world.
Yeah.
So cheers, King, Rotary, and the people.
King.
Cheers. Yeah. Cheers.
So thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks very much.